We concluded our message last week by reflecting on the Star of Bethlehem, crowning the tower of the Virgin Mary of the Sagrada Familia Basilica. This 7.5-metre creation brightly punctuates Barcelona's skyline for residents and tourists to admire, and draws our minds to the star which rested upon the birthplace of Jesus Christ. In the darkness, the light appears to shine the brightest. As the nights continue to draw in, we find ourselves increasingly in need of artificial light to guide our way and keep us safe. As John 1 verse 5 says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it." The purpose of light is to illuminate the darkness. The same applies to hope too. The purpose of hope is to illuminate and eliminate despair. Today, we are reflecting on the portal or the doorway of hope on the nativity facade of the Sagrada Familia, dedicated to Joseph. What is fascinating about the doorway of hope is that the images that Gaudi gives in the sculptural groups are not exactly hope-inspiring, quite the contrary. The slaughter of the innocents on Herod's orders and the flight into Egypt of Mary, Joseph and Jesus do not warm our hearts and bring much solace. But then perhaps that's exactly why they represent hope. Hope isn't needed when everything is easy. Hope means nothing when we are comfortable. What does hope look like? What does hope sound like? What does hope feel like? For hope to come alive, there must be a degree of hopelessness, an unease and unsettling at what we see, and the uncertainty we are surrounded by. A world free from pain, loss and grief would be a world that needs no hope. Hope is most alive not in the images of success, satisfaction and security, but in images of suffering, sadness and struggle. As Romans 8 verses 24 to 25 read, "For this is the hope of our salvation. But hope means that we must trust and wait for what is still unseen. For why would we need to hope for something we already have? So because our hope is set on what is yet to be seen, we patiently keep on waiting for its fulfillment." I recently read about a painting that had a powerful message to it. It was a picture of an old burnt-out mountain shack. All that remained was the chimney and the charred debris of what had been the family's only possession. In front of this destroyed home stood an old grandfather, dressed only in his underclothes, with a small boy clutching a pair of patched overalls. The child was crying. Beneath the picture were the words which the artist felt the old man was saying to the boy. They were simple words, yet they presented a profound theology and philosophy of life. Those words were, "Hush, child, God ain't dead." As we expectantly await Christmas, we expectantly await the arrival of hope, because God ain't dead. He is alive with the vitality of life that only comes in the form of a baby. When any baby is born, parents have hopes for their child about who they will grow up to be. Scripture does not tell us of Joseph's hopes for the boy he would raise as his own. But whatever those hopes were, this boy would totally eclipse them. On the hope doorway, we see an image of the betrothal of Mary and Joseph. At the time of Jesus, the Jewish marriage process involved two separate parts, the first of which was betrothal. This was an exchange of consent made between a man and a woman before witnesses, and would most likely be arranged by their families. Betrothal was binding, and it could only be ended by death or divorce. After the betrothal, there was a period of several months in which the woman remained with her family before moving into her husband's home and living together as husband and wife. It is between this time of betrothal and marriage that Mary falls pregnant. Young couples often have so many hopes and dreams for the future, but an unexpected pregnancy would not be on the radar for Mary and Joseph. When unexpected life events throw us a curveball, we can be tempted to despair, give up, and count all as lost. But when life threw Joseph a curveball, he saw a brighter hope. Initially, we see a gracious man looking to end his relationship with Mary on the quiet. But then we see a man who is convicted by the words of an angel in a dream. Because of this encounter, Joseph chooses hope. He recognizes the inevitable darkness and pain that continuing his relationship with Mary will bring, but believes that something far more glorious will come through this baby. Our world bears a resemblance to the doorway of hope. Innocent people are killed in our world, and people are forced to flee their homes because of threats for their lives. The animals and plants that decorate the Hope Portal represent those found around the Nile: water lilies, dragonflies, acacias. This draws our mind to the dark events following the birth of Christ. Joseph is warned in a dream to take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. Egypt became a place of hope in the midst of a seemingly hopeless situation. There was a glimmer of hope in that place. And 2,000 years on, people are still seeing glimmers of hope in places of sanctuary when evil and violence forces them from their homes. On the surface, the war in Ukraine can cause feelings of hopelessness. But scratch a little further and we see stories of people's inner resolve to find peace and pursue hope. We see people leaving behind so much because they believe in hope. Joseph found himself in a very dangerous situation. The boy he cared for as his son was threatened with death. But in the darkness, as Joseph cradles Jesus, he has faith that the baby who cries and eats and sleeps is the hope of the world. And that is the joy and wonder of Christmas. Just as beautiful Christmas lights shimmer and shine in the dark nights of December, so too the baby born in Bethlehem shines with hope in the dark nights of our world. Topping off the doorway of hope is a great mountain crag, which many have taken to represent Catalonia's sacred mountain, Montserrat. On the side of this peak we read the word Salvanos, save us. We can imagine this being cried out by the Jewish people waiting for a Messiah. We can imagine this being cried out by Joseph and Mary as they faced all the pressures of carrying Jesus. We can imagine this being cried out by people today battling to negotiate the overwhelming challenges of life. We can imagine this being cried out by us. Simply crying out, Salvanos, is an expression of hope. Hope that there is someone who can and will save us. And we believe that this is Jesus, whose birth we celebrate once again this year. Ironically, the cultural Christmas we have created can make things seem less hopeless. If we are struggling financially, or emotionally, or relationally, Christmas can emphasize this, as the image conveyed is that everyone else is living their perfect Christmas. The truth is, even the first Christmas was far from perfect. An unexpected pregnancy, a long treacherous journey, and a potential night on the streets, dirty accommodation, threats of death, a refugee crisis. None of this is perfect. But in the midst of imperfection arrived a baby boy who not only brought hope, but was hope itself. God can transform hopeless situations. But even when situations seem to degenerate, hope is still present because God is right there in the mess with us. The baby laid in a manger is hope because the baby laid in a manger is Emmanuel, God with us. And if God is with us, can anything defeat us? Sometimes people give up hope. Perhaps at times that includes us. Whilst there are no hopeless situations, we can begin to feel hopeless in them. When the dreams we have are not realised and the breakthrough we long for does not happen, we become disheartened. But Joseph knew that whilst his present reality may be dangerous and challenging, he had under his care one who would transform all eternity. There is more to life than today. There is more to life than this earth. Joseph knew it. The baby he held came into the world not because everything was perfect, but because God wanted to redeem all its imperfections, however great or small. When we place our hope in God, we can never hope too much. Hope is not optimism or pie in the sky when you die mentality. It is the assurance that actually things are far brighter than they seem, because God is good. He is loving, he is kind, he is compassionate, and he is making all things new. We traditionally think of Jesus as growing up to be a carpenter, following in the footsteps of Joseph. But the Gospels do not actually call Joseph a carpenter. Instead, the term teknos is used, simply meaning a craftsman, without specifying the craft. Technos were those who built houses, whether of stone or wood, or indeed both. This must have appealed to Gaudi, as we see engraved in the Hope doorway such diverse implements as a hammer, an axe, a carpenter's square, a mallet, and a screwdriver, all builders' tools. In another scene, we see Joseph captaining a boat, and his face bears a similarity to Gaudi himself. It is suggested that as this was created after Gaudi's death, it was a tribute to him by the craftsmen who followed. Both Joseph and Gaudi were people who created, modelled and built. Whilst we might not be practically creative, all of us are building something with our lives. We may create an atmosphere of encouragement or criticism. We may model kindness or model chaos. We may build others up or build our ego up. When we come to realise for ourselves the wonder of hope which radiated from that first nativity scene, we cannot help but build an environment of hope. If we really believe that 2,000 years ago hope came down from heaven, then we can choose to not let darkness consume us, but model hope. Just as it did 2 millennia ago, our world continues to thirst for hope. Perhaps the greatest testimony we can offer the world this Christmas is the modelling of hope. Hope that is real, alive and true. For as Hebrews 10 verse 23 says, "Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful." God bless you.